Why is elk hunting so hard? In this video, I'm gonna try to share 3 things that I have learned from my experience of 14 years hunting elk, as well as from watching other people and listening to other hunters. What makes elk hunting so difficult? And I will share 3 things. What will make elk hunting easier for you and will bring you more success. So first, you have to understand what kind of animal the elk are. And elk are big animals. They are herd animals. They like to move together, and they need a lot of food. So when we're trying to understand what kind of animal the elk is, we need to focus on what do they want, where do they want to go, why do they want to go there, and why do they stay there. So for example, when September comes, it might be really hot, and elk are going to start moving either up to the timberline in the mountains at higher elevation, because that's where it's cooler, that's where there's more green food, and they don't want to be just like out in the dry forest. And that's what I noticed here in Oregon. I have been hunting anywhere from 2,000 feet to 5,000 feet, and I haven't seen a single elk. And once I moved upwards of 5,000 feet, I was in elk pretty much every day. So trying to understand what kind of animal the elk are, they need a lot of food. One elk can eat up to 40 pounds of food per day. And imagine you have a herd of 10 elk. They need that food, that amount of food. So they're gonna look for that food and they're gonna go there. Another thing is that elk are big animals and they're tough animals. That's why a lot of times people don't find them in the lower elevations or in plains, you know. They are tough animals, so they like the mountains, they like canyons, they like steep, deep canyons where they can go away from people, from predators, because they have to feel safe. So safety is number one thing for wild animals, because they want to stay away from the predators, and once they get away from the predators, they need to have food. So safety and food source. Why does an average person never get an elk? And why is there the 10% of people that always get one? And average people, they don't do what the elk do, in the sense of average people, they stick closer to roads, easy access. They don't want to go down into the deep canyons or up into the deep canyons, very steep canyons. So that's why they're not in elk. They don't find elk, they don't see elk. That's what average people do. But if you want to get elk, if you want to harvest nice bulls, you gotta get off the roads, you gotta go into canyons, you gotta go and do what the average hunters don't do. Sometimes it means getting off the trails, sometimes it means going overnight, sometimes it just means going farther than an average person, because an average hunter will go 3-4 miles off the trail. You'll have to go 6 miles off the trail or off the road. And of course that's going to make the pack out a lot more difficult, but if that's the thing, if that's how you want to get an elk, you'll have to do what average people don't do. And I think now most people, they just drive around on their trucks on logging roads and mountain roads and hop out, bugle call. They don't see anything. That's what average people are doing. But you cannot be an average person, because you don't want an average result. You want an extraordinary result. So you got to do things that average hunters are not willing to do. The average success rate of an elk hunter is roughly about 10%. That's statewide in Oregon. So the 10% of people get 90% of elk, and 90% of people get 10% of elk. And that just comes down to the 3 things that I was mentioning before. I promised you I'm going to share them. So the 3 things that I have learned from my experience of 14 years hunting elk and from watching other people are: first, you have to know the animal that you're hunting. Second, you have to learn the area that you're hunting. And thing number 3 is you have to be consistent. So let's start with the first one. You have to know the animal. You have to understand the animal. You have to understand the noises that the animal makes. Why does it make those sounds? What does it want? Where does it go? Why does it go there? What do they prefer? Because sometimes they will get away from the roads where there's a lot of food near the roads, but they'll get away from them just because there's a lot of pressure. Or they'll go up higher to 6,000-7,000 feet because there's more food over there and less predators up there, and it's not as dry as between 3,000 to 5,000 feet. like in the eastern side of Oregon, eastern side of Washington, when it's really hot during September. And thing number three is you have to stay consistent, because the compound effect is when you stay consistent, the compound effect will kick in. Instead of trying this area for one day, then moving 5 miles that way, then moving 5 miles that way, pick an area, 10 square miles, and stay there for 2-3 days. You'll know every drainage, you'll know every creek, you know every bench, every little canyon. And just because you're staying consistent in one area, the chances of you getting something are gonna go up. The problem is that you have to be in an area where there are animals. So if you're seeing zero tracks, if you're seeing zero evidence of elk, of course, move to another area. But what a lot of hunters do, they choose one area, they'll go there for half a day, then they're going to drive 20 miles into a different direction and hunt the rest of the day over there. And you're wasting a lot of time driving in between, or thinking. You're wasting your emotional energy, not focusing on the area that you already chose, but instead you come to your hunting spot and then you're starting to think, oh, I should have went there, or maybe I should have went there, or maybe I would have had more success in a different spot. And then you're driving across the unit, 50 miles to try something else where there's elk in a lot of places. You just have to pick one area, 10, 20, 30 square miles, and there's elk there. And you have to study that area. And another thing is, a lot of times we see older guys who are like 60, 70, 75, killing elk all the time. And comparing those guys to ourselves, we're like, we can hike 10, 12, 15, 17 miles per day and not see anything. But those guys, 60, 70-year-olds, they go and they get an elk. And we're like, how do they do it? Because they're very limited on their ability to hike in and hike out. They do other things that we don't do. So they can either really know the area, or they can be really patient at one spot. And when I say patient on one spot, is they can choose one clear cut and they will sit there all day, because they know the elk are gonna come through, or some other hunters are gonna pressure them, and they're gonna move from one spot to another, and they'll move through that clear cut, and that's when that elderly hunter will shoot that elk. So but we're being young, and we just think that the more area we cover, the better, but that's not the best case in every scenario. And I do like hiking, and I do like moving a lot, but I also noticed for myself, I can hike for like 6 miles, and then I'm gonna be like, you know what, I don't like this spot, and I'm gonna like drive an hour the other way. And by that time, I already wasted half a day, instead of just focusing on one area for the full day and learning that area. So again, the three things that I was promising to say are: you have to learn the animal, you have to learn the area, and you have to stay consistent. And if you do those three things, your success rate is going to skyrocket, and you will be in the 10% of elk hunters that get an elk every year.